Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight, my guest is Mike Ricksecker. Before I bring him on, I want to remind you to subscribe to Forbidden Knowledge News on library.tv. It's now Odyssey. You can click that same link in the description. You'll still get there. We're always available on all popular podcast platforms, and definitely check us out on Rokfin. Rokfin is where you get all our juicy premium content. You get our Forbidden Knowledge News con that we just held. You get last year's, all our regular shows, and all the premium content from everybody on Rokfin. Just click that link in the description or visit rokfin.com/FKN+. I also want to tell you about how you can protect yourself from harmful EMF radiation with EMF Harmonized. They offer protection from harmful electromagnetic frequencies for your phone, computer, or tablet, and your routers. I've got one on all my devices. It's just a small little disc, goes directly on your devices. I've noticed a major difference of not feeling as groggy. I sleep better at night. I have more energy, even after all day spending hours next to these devices. You can get their bracelets that offer the same protection. The products were created by a mechanical engineer with 3 decades of experience in EMFs and telecommunication. Just click the link below to check out what they have to offer. Tonight, I want to welcome back to the show Mike Ricksecker. He is an award-winning author of several books. He has appeared on multiple shows and programs as a paranormal historian, and he hosts the Edge of the Rabbit Hole live stream show and Beyond the Shadows on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel. He is also director and producer of the Shadow Dimensions docuseries, and he regularly travels to speak about supernatural phenomena. Mike, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Chris. Thanks for having me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Yes, it's awesome having you back. Last time you were on, we talked about the shadow people phenomenon mainly. Tonight, I want to go a little bit deeper into that. We're going to talk about some possible connections with ufology and the ET phenomenon, and we'll see what rabbit holes we can jump into going down there. Last time we did discuss your early childhood encounters with shadow people, which was fascinating. I'm wondering, after that, did you have any other encounters with shadow people growing up or as an adult?
Yeah, you mentioned the very first one there that I had. That one was when I was about 8 years old. It was actually a physical interaction with this, in which this thing actually crossed my arms across my body. The second interaction that I had with a shadow entity was a little bit older. I was 13 years old, and we had moved from that house where I had the previous interaction, which was in Massachusetts, to a new house in Ohio. And, I'm just unpacking boxes, putting things away, and I kept noticing this figure standing in my bedroom doorway. And I'd turn and look, and it would take off, usually down the hall toward my parents' bedroom. And so this happened several times over the course of a few days as I'm continuing to put things away, unpack boxes, rearrange furniture, all that stuff. And I finally decided to ask my mother about it, and just I told her what I was seeing, and she actually confirmed that she had seen the same thing too. Now, when I was younger, of course, they had tried to just console me and told me that I had a bad dream, but this time apparently she thought I was a little bit more mature, and told me that she had seen the same thing too. Which was great for me because it was a nice affirmation that I wasn't crazy. I was actually seeing this thing. And the other thing that was great about it was that, she wasn't alarmed at all by this thing. She just kind of admitted, yep, I've seen the same thing. So what I ended up doing was I got very playful with it. I started calling it Tom, like peeping Tom. So anytime I'd see him standing in my doorway, I'd say, hi, Tom. And he'd take off down the hall. And that activity lasted for about, 3 or 4 months and then just subsided. So, I chalked it up to something that was there in the house, was curious about the new family moving in, and then it just went about its business. Now, as a paranormal investigator, I've had many experiences with shadow entities, and I'm sure we could talk about several of those, whatever you'd like.
Yeah, I'd like to hear about some of them. Probably the most profound for you experiences that you had. I guess the ones that stick out in your mind the most. Maybe one or two.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are two that were really profound. You know,
Yeah.
one was the last one that I just had. It was a couple of years ago now, and this was before COVID, had put on a conference, the Haunted Road Media Paracon, and we have a nighttime paranormal investigation following that, and we'd gotten really toward the end of that night. There was just a handful of people left, and this was at the Mineral Springs Hotel in Alton, Illinois. And we were in the upstairs abandoned part of the hotel, and we were in a corner suite that is known as Pearl's Room, and it's a unfortunate story up there, confirmed suicide, and many people had interacted with this spirit of Pearl up there, and so we're just up there doing an EVP session, electronic voice phenomenon, and all of a sudden we start hearing some things coming from down the one hallway. So I venture out there into the hall, and I'm looking down, and at the end of the hallway is this black smoke that's starting to billow forth. And as it's coming closer and closer, it starts doing something very strange. It starts creeping up the wall on the right hand side of the hall, and it would creep back down, it would creep back up and creep back down as it's coming closer and closer. And finally, one of these times that it crept up the wall on the right hand side, it actually morphed into the apparition of a little girl. And the others had joined me by then. They all see this little girl that's coming toward us. And we're kind of trying to coax her closer. And she only went as far as this one doorway, which ironically was the door to a room up there in which many others had actually reported interacting with the spirit of a little girl up there. So, to us, obviously, it was this girl, but it was profound because it really confirmed something for me. I've been speaking about shadow phenomenon for many years, and in my early days, I always made this distinction between human spirits are human spirits, and shadow people are shadow people. And I say in my book, A Walk in the Shadows, that I reserve the right to change my mind because I have, as you continue to research and evolve, you learn different things. And so your opinion 10 years ago may not be your opinion today. And 10 years from now, your opinion may change still. So I used to make this distinction and, talking to a number of people after giving my presentations and other investigators that I would interact with, a number of them were like, Mike, I really do think some of these are actually human spirits. And, they tell me their stories. And so I'd gotten to the point over several years, I was like, all right, fine. Some of these could certainly be human spirits. And this absolutely confirmed it for me because here it was, black smoke, black a black shadow that morphed into this apparition of a little girl, and it was amazing. Another thing that's really profound about this is that even though we all saw her, we all saw her a little bit differently. So, like, I saw her completely, like, from the top of her head down to her knees, and then she faded away, while others saw her, like, completely from her feet all the way up to about her head, and then the head started to fade away, and some just, like, saw her torso. So it was really interesting how we all saw her differently. And this really goes into an area of research that I've started studying some more when it comes to people's personal resonance and vibration and how our vibration interacts with the rest of the universe. So I mean, we could dive deep into that rabbit hole, but basically, you know, the little girl having her own personal vibration, each of us having our own, we were able to see her each a little bit differently because of that. The each being on a different frequency.
Yeah, that is super interesting. I was actually on a show earlier, and I was kind of posing the question of if we're reincarnated, or is it that after death we have this collective consciousness to where we're kind of connected to everything, and we may be just picking up on these memories or this collective memory of someone else's life. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different things that this could be. It could be all of them. It could be that somebody's energy has remained here on Earth that we're able to interact with, while others go on and end up reincarnating. Some we talk about like residual haunts, where in energy dispersion from a particular event has retained itself within a building or an area, and we don't know what the catalyst is, but it kicks off when we're able to see that play out. Some of these are also things like time slips, where And this was kind of what happened with another shadow encounter, but basically where two moments in time are resonating at the same frequency, and we get a glimpse of each other. So we may get a glimpse of, say, a woman in a Victorian dress, and maybe we even see part of the room that she's in, and she turns and looks at us as if we're the ghosts. And what's fascinating about that is like, okay, we're getting a glimpse of the past, but she's actually getting a glimpse of the future.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I've thought about that before too. Now, I'd like to go back to the other experience that you were going to tell us about as well.
Yeah, that one, several years ago now, probably about 10 years ago now, in Muskogee, Oklahoma, it was a restaurant called Johnny V's. And we were just finishing up a paranormal investigation. A couple of guys were upstairs in the bar area. A couple of others are out in the front restaurant area. And I was just doing a final photo sweep of the restaurant. And I'm walking through the main door to the kitchen. And as I'm walking in, this very translucent, quick, tall shadow just darts right across the room, and you hear this bang of it into this side door. It was just a little flimsy metal door that waiters and waitresses would carry large trays of food through. Very, like I said, very flimsy. You could just tap the thing and it would open. But what was interesting is that even though you heard that bang, the door didn't move. So I call out to the others, "Hey, hey, did you guys hear that?" And they're like, "Yeah, we heard that." And I described to them what I saw. And I for a moment I thought maybe these guys are messing with me. Maybe they threw something at the door to try to spook me or whatever, because I was kind of on my own. And then I asked them, "Did you guys throw something at the door?" No. But I still went out there. I'm looking around on the ground, went through the door. I'm looking on the ground. No, there's nothing on the ground here. Okay. And even if they had thrown something at the door, it would have moved because it was just that flimsy of a door. So, what had I actually witnessed here? And this has kind of become the crux of my book, A Walk in the Shadows, and why I think a quote unquote true shadow entity is an interdimensional being. What happened is I walked into that kitchen, and for whatever reason, really again, not understanding the catalyst, other than I believe that there were two moments either in time or two moments in space time, in two different dimensions that were resonating at the same frequency for a brief moment, in which I was able to get a glimpse of some other dimension, and that entity from that other dimension was able to get a glimpse of me. And as I walked in that door, I scared it. It got spooked. It went tearing off through that kitchen, and on its plane of existence, in its dimension, perhaps it blew right through that door. That door opened wide and it ran off into the restaurant. But I didn't see it because physically I'm on my own plane of existence. However, sound works on a different wavelength, a different frequency. And so that was actually able to traverse the dimensions from his or hers, we don't know, into ours. And so I was able to actually hear that.
That is super interesting. Now, kind of along the same lines, do you think, like yourself, maybe that some people are more sensitive to kind of seeing these things? Because there's some people that go their whole lives without experiencing anything paranormal, or, and they can be around somebody who sees something right in front of them, one or two people, maybe more, that see something, and they don't see anything. What do you think is happening with that?
Yeah, this is kind of what I was talking about before with our own personal resonance. We have our own personal resonance, our own personal vibration. And so, mine is going to be, different than yours. There's a certain, range for a human. And, we're all at a little bit of a different level. And so, uh, what's happening here, like some people see more shadows than apparitions and others see more apparitions than shadows. And like you said, some people don't see anything at all. They could be standing right there. Somebody sees something the other doesn't. And that's kind of like what happened where we all saw the little girl a little bit differently. So yeah, with us each having our own personal vibration, we see things a little bit differently than others. And we're just talking about, pure energy. So the reason why I would see more shadows and apparitions is because my frequency has gotten in tune with the frequency of these different shadow entities. And so when one is nearby, I have a better chance of seeing it than somebody else who hasn't ever seen one before, or perhaps, has a propensity to see more apparitions. Now, occasionally I do see the apparitions, but it's nowhere near as often as the shadows. And I think, the opposite is true. When somebody's able to see, apparitions a lot more often, it's because their personal resonance has become in tune with the frequency that apparitions appear on most. And so they're able to see them a little bit more often.
Now, do you think that you were always in tune like this, or it may be because of your earlier experiences that you kind of gained this and it became a little stronger?
Well, I think my earlier experiences have certainly helped. That's kind of how I got introduced to it. So that really opened me up to it. And I've talked with people that had no experiences with the paranormal, or at least they didn't think they had any experiences with the paranormal until they were an adult. And all of a sudden, they had one experience, and then boom, they were able to see all kinds of different things. So there's something about interacting with these things that, or interacting with this phenomenon, that our body adjusts to it. And I've been going on paranormal investigations for a long, long time now, and putting myself into these situations to be able to try to interact with these different entities. So yeah, my body's gotten more in tune to it. It's become adjusted to it, so that when I'm going into a situation, or I don't even have to purposely go into a situation, I could just walk into a building, and if there's something there, um, it's kind of to the point now where I don't even necessarily have to see it. I kind of can feel that, okay, there's something around here. And sometimes of course I do see it.
Yeah, that is super interesting. Um, Especially when people can be in the same room and see something completely different. I find that very profoundly interesting. Um, Now, when it comes to shadow people, or is that the most, I guess you could say, common apparition that people are seeing? Because when it comes to especially video footage, I guess the most legitimate video footage I've ever seen is of actual shadow entities rather than any other type of apparition, like the typical ghostly apparition that looks like kind of like a person that you can see through or whatever. It seems to be more these shadow entities, right?
But I mean, yeah, there's a lot of interesting footage out there, and it's with some of it, like you see it on YouTube, and it's hard to know, okay, what's
Oh yeah, it's
actually
definitely hard to tell
real and
what's
what's
real.
not out there. So personally, it's actually hard to catch some of these things, on video or on, as a photo. You could take thousands and thousands of photos and never end up with anything, and hours of video footage and never anything. So,
Well, aside from
um,
video, I'm mainly guess I'm referring to people's personal encounters in
mhm.
stories. Would you say that the shadow person is the most prevalent apparition?
You get a mix of both. I mean, I deal, for me, it's kind of hard to say because I deal mostly in shadow phenomena. I talk about all kinds of different phenomena, whether it is, ghosts, apparitions, ETs, all kinds of stuff. But because I deal a lot with shadow entities, that's what people are coming to me for. So that's what my inbox is littered with. But even my own footage that I've captured. I have a fantastic piece of footage from Cancelville Grade School, which you can actually see a shadow person walking. But I've also caught a photograph of a white wisp when we had paranormal activity basically happening right there at the Stone Lion Inn. And so, yeah, it's an interesting mix. And I know where you're going with the question, but again, it's a little bit harder for me to discern that, just because of the flooding I get in my inbox of all the shadow activity.
Now, have you ever, have you had any reports of, I guess you could say, violent encounters with shadow people or any type of apparition similar?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly happens. A lot of people want to go straight to it's a demon, which and again, going back to my inbox, I'll get people that email me and say, "Well, I have a demon." Okay, why do you think you have a demon? Well, a candle flew off my mantle. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean you have a demon. Let's take a step back and figure it out. I mean, there is one particular case, and that was the case that we filmed for The Haunted about. I guess it was almost 11 years ago now. That was in Edmond, Oklahoma. And she was seeing this red eyed shadow entity in her closet. She was an adult daughter of the family. It was terrorizing her, it was terrorizing the cat. Other members of the family had seen it. They wanted it out of the house. And we were trying to figure out exactly, okay, who or what this thing was. Was this thing, something human? Because plenty of human spirits that are, nefarious or malevolent. It doesn't have to be a demon. And then, of course, there are other spirits and entities out there that are, again, quite benign or and even benevolent. But this one, yeah, certainly was up to no good. And as we were investigating, and this was over the course of several months. The television show kind of makes it look that like, the family was having this activity. They contacted us. We had an investigation, deemed it was demonic, and we brought in a demonologist, Carl Johnson, to cleanse the place, and everything was good to go. It took a long time. We were there investigating for several months, did a lot of historic research on the house to determine, okay, is it one of these people that had previously died in the house? There were a couple of confirmed suicides there, a couple of attempted suicides. So there was some dark history with the house. So we needed to rule out, was it any of these particular people? And through the course of this investigation, we're ruling this person out, that person out, and we're watching what's happening with the girl, and she was getting progressively worse and worse. She was basically experiencing oppression, and it was borderline possession. And so when we did have Carl come out to cleanse the house, there was a particular moment in which we're going through, we're doing a house cleansing. We had the family waiting outside so we could do this, but the girl had come in because she needed to use the restroom. And after she had finished up, all of a sudden she's in the master bedroom. She's talking at something unseen against the wall. And, you know, she's saying things like, why are you here? Why are you terrorizing us? Stuff like that. And so Carl decided that he was going to do a blessing over her. And as he's doing this, all of a sudden she doubles over in pain, like she gets punched in the gut, falls to the ground. We pick her up. She's okay. She kind of recovers. When I listened back over to my audio after that, there was an EVP right there where she got punched in the gut that said die. So there was something definitely malevolent there that was trying to hurt her. And when we did push that thing out, we got it out to the backyard, and the wind had kicked up like something crazy, and the cats are running around just like crazy. It was just all kinds of bizarre things happening that night. Like the back door kept blowing open for one, and um, what was really interesting is that when we had finally pushed it out, that wind completely died down and everything was completely calm. So that was an extremely wild night. And, of all the years that I've been doing this, that is like the one case that I can actually say was demonic.
Wow, that is crazy. Now, when it comes to the shadow people, you said that you believe that most likely they may be some type of interdimensional entities. You have a very interesting presentation coming up at the Laughlin UFO Mega Conference that speculates if these, may be extraterrestrials. What are some of what is some of the evidence and research you've done that kind of points to the direction that these may be interdimensional beings or some kind of extraterrestrials? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, the story that I previously told about Johnny Veeves, that to me, that was certainly interdimensional. There was something of that nature going on there like that. When it comes to ETs, I mean, several, ETs could, be traveling interdimensionally. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical craft coming down and them landing. I mean, it could be. And even with that, um, let's say, an ET physically comes down to Earth, and they're exploring, they're researching, I mean, what would we do when we arrive on, another planet somewhere that has other life forms? We're going to be observing, researching, investigating, that sort of thing. um Watching, like, we would be the watchers in that case. And so I think sometimes, and this is going to be a little bit speculative as far as this theory, but um let's say they come down here and they don't necessarily want to be seen, and they utilize some sort of cloaking technology, and they don't quite understand the physiology of our eyes. So they're utilizing this cloaking technology, and our eyes are still picking it up to some degree because they don't understand how our eyes necessarily work. And so it comes off perhaps as a shadow, or some people even report like a shimmer man sort of thing. And so that's one possibility. But when it comes to interdimensional travel, they could be traveling here through means of some sort of other technology, whether it's, consciousness, they could be, projecting their consciousness here, or if they have, mastered space time and they're able to do what we, love to talk about, portals and stargates and what have you, if they're traveling through those means to come here, that could be, the way that they're appearing is as some sort of shadow and not completely as a physical form. Because if traveling from one dimension to another, may have some physical repercussions. Not necessarily that they would be physically harmed, but the way that we would actually see it with our eyes from one dimension to another, it could come off as some of these different forms that people are reporting.
Do you think there are these designated realms for the afterlife, like a higher vibrational realm for, if you've moved on to the plane you're supposed to move on to, and lower vibrational if maybe you're stuck in a certain emotional state when you die, or you're not happy with the life you've lived, that there's going to be a lower realm that you're going to go to, and some spirits may be stuck in this dimension, partially, and may not be able to exit at all. Do you think that's the case when it comes to the afterlife?
Yeah, there's some place that we go to. We get a lot of our information from people who have had near-death experiences, and what they've seen from the beyond. We have psychics that talk to spirit guides and things like that, and we get some information from there. And what's interesting about all that is you have some similarities between many of these experiences, and you have a number of differences as well. So what's the real story? What are we actually picking up on? People who do past life regressions sometimes pick up informations about that place that we go to after we pass on. And I think what happens in a lot of cases, I think there's multiple things that can happen. Yeah, you can stay here, in the earthly realm, hang out for a little while, and then move on. Whether I think some people do feel stuck here. Some people don't necessarily realize that they've passed on, or they're in denial and they are stuck here. Some may have some unfinished business. I know with my grandfather, um, he was basically waiting around for my grandmother. He visited many of us within the family. Um, and once she passed, it was like, okay, he's not around anymore, and neither is she. So they went on, to wherever that is. Kind of, I kind of call it the quote unquote home world, that we go to, and we're there for a while, and then I do believe in reincarnation, and we come back here. So um, and it kind of all plays into the idea of the simulated universe that we're interacting within this simulation for a little while. We can take on different forms depending on what's going on within our reality. And what's interesting is a lot of religions actually describe um, the simulation without actually calling it the simulation. Like the whole idea of reincarnation. If you think about, you logging into just a virtual game world or what have you, which is a simulation, that um, you're interacting within it. You do, some whatever tasks, maybe you learn something, whatever, and then you move on elsewhere, and then you repeat the whole cycle, which is basically reincarnation. Or some religions talk about we come down here and we prepare to go on to another world. So they're describing that sort of thing. They just don't use the word simulation.
Yeah, yeah, that's super fascinating. What about animals? Do you think that animal spirits, I guess, can be stuck here in a way, and that we can witness them? Have you ever had any investigations where there's animals involved?
Yeah, people do report shadow animals, shadow pets, and the like. What I've seen are shadow cats on occasion, or at least they look like they might be cats. They kind of had that size and kind of demeanor, the way they would slink about. My good friend Rob Guttrow, he does. He's a psychic medium, but he also does a lot of dog rescue work, and he's owned several dogs over the years, and he'll rescue them and raise them, and he does all that wonderful stuff. Um, he submitted a small section to the shadow animal part of my book, A Walk in the Shadows, that actually talks about a lot of different interactions with shadow pets. And like we were talking before about, some of these shadow entities being human spirits, and I described the rolling black smoke into the little girl. He's had an incident in which he had observed one of his dogs who had passed basically come back to visit and came back as half shadow, half apparition, which is really interesting.
So yeah, that is really interesting. So the dog came back as a half shadow, half apparition. Um, have you had any other, I guess, investigations or stories where they've had animals involved? Anything other than like house pets, maybe farm animals or anything like that?
Um, you know, I've heard some interesting stuff like this. What? Well, I mean, I've heard several accounts of like shadow spiders. That had include a interesting story about shadow spiders and a fantastic illustration within the book. One that's really interesting that would be related to like old hag syndrome, which we end up relating uh, to shadow activity, shadow phenomenon, because the whole sleep paralysis aspect and all that. This woman had basically woken up in the middle of the night, was being pressed down like you get with old hag syndrome, but what was on top of her was a dire wolf, and that's what she saw was this dire wolf bearing down on her. And her husband woke up to his wife, thrashing about with this thing. Now he didn't actually see the dire wolf, but what he saw was actually the impressions on her shoulders that were pressed down from the paw prints of this thing. So he could see basically the paws pressing into her shoulders. And once he like, got up and flipped the light on and all that, everything just ended right there. But extremely, extremely interesting that he could actually see the impressions of the paws in her shoulders while she was dealing with this thing.
Yeah, that is, and that's kind of a good segue into cryptid encounters because there's a lot of strange animal sightings involved with some of these cryptid encounters. Um, I guess we could start with since you mentioned the wolf type being. What do you think about dogmen sightings? And do you think that it's actually some type of supernatural creature or some kind of maybe lost hominid or something like that?
Yeah, a lot of these sightings are really interesting. Are they lost hominids? Like the Sasquatch and what have you. Or some people believe that they could be interdimensional beings, phasing in and out of our reality here, or even extraterrestrials. There's a lot of different ideas as to what these things could possibly be. I haven't done a lot of research on the dog band specifically, but all these things are kind of seemingly related, and I do believe some of them are these these creatures that have kind of been lost to time, and there's still a handful of them around. I believe that of Sasquatch, and you hear the stories in Alaska that they may even think that there's still some, not even a cryptid, but just like a legitimate, woolly mammoth that may still be up there. A few of them still roaming around, and it's just such a huge, vast area up there that it's hard to pinpoint them. So yeah, some of these things could be, actual physical creatures that are with us today, and it's just very hard to find them. Some of them, if we're talking about a being from another dimension or another world, somebody that has learned how to travel across the universe to here, well, they're gonna look differently than us, and but have some similarities as well. So a number of these could be whether it's some sort of bipedal being that has the form that we would relate to a dog. You kind of have to take into account that when we see some of these sightings, we're going to relate it to things that we've seen. That's the context that we're going to put it into. To me it looked like a dog, because that's contextually, what you can relate it to, but it, may not really be a dog at all, or whatever the form may be.
Yeah, one of the most terrifying type of cryptid creatures that I've come across, looking at videos and just research and guests that I've had is what they call the Rake, some kind of hairless humanoid creature with like long arms and. Sometimes they have long legs. Sometimes they have shorter legs. They look different at times. But I'd like to get your take on this creature and if you've had any experience or investigations or research into this.
Yeah, the with the rake, some people try to relate that to shadow phenomena because a lot of the descriptions are very similar to shadow entities. So are they related? Are people seeing something and either relating it to a shadow, or are they taking a shadow and relating it to a rake? There's a lot of crossover, and like when we talk about the crawler type shadow entities, are some of these crawler uh, shadows, are they actually the rake? So you get those questions. I have had a shadow, or I'm sorry, I have had a crawler encounter. I don't necessarily think it was a rake, but slipped in as a shadow through the window. It was an old abandoned church, and really you saw like this flurry of very long arms, very long legs, uh, you know, kind of crawling and circling us around the basement, along the walls, up on the ceiling. So it had some, similar, uh, you physical qualities that you hear with the rake sightings.
I've had someone on recently that talked about a Bigfoot sighting where the Bigfoot started crawling on all fours like that. Very, very
Oh, that's
creepily.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of, you've never heard of a Bigfoot crawling on all fours like that, right?
I have not heard that. No, Bigfoot on all fours. No,
Yeah, he said it got
that's different.
the person with the sighting was in a vehicle with his he was with someone else, but they had like a family of Bigfoot that jumped out into the middle of the road and got all defensive and got on all fours and started doing these like spider like crawling in front of the vehicle and like kind of acting like they were going to charge but not charging in this kind of aggressive way. It was a very very fascinating story to hear about.
Oh,
What
well,
about
yeah, that's definitely different.
yeah, what about Bigfoot? And have you ever had any investigations that involved any Bigfoots or aggressive Bigfoot encounters?
I mean, I've had people talk to me, of course, about Bigfoot, especially when you get into the possibility of them maybe being interdimensional beings, or some people think that they may be ETs. So we've had some conversations about that. I don't go out into the woods, looking for Bigfoot or
Right,
anything
right,
like
right.
that, but I certainly keep my mind open to all these different ideas, and if I'm out there in the wilderness. It's usually going to be for something else, not for that. But it's always a consideration when you start hearing and seeing some interesting things out in the wilderness, out in the woods somewhere. So you have to be cognizant of not just what you're looking for, but all the other possibilities as well.
Another creepy paranormal phenomenon that I'd like to get your take on is doppelgangers. People see like
Mm.
an evil or terrifying version of themselves that looks like them, just slightly different or more evil, or something like that, possibly in the mirror, or even get a glimpse, even outside in real life of something that looks exactly like them. But in a more terrifying way. Could you tell us any encounters or experiences that you've heard or researched about doppelgangers?
Yeah, this has been a kind of interesting topic for me over the past couple of years because you know, I, people will chalk doppelgangers up to that, like you were saying, the evil twin. Um, you know, it, I had so, and I did a video on doppelgangers last year, and I had somebody helping me edit that video, and they went down the whole like celebrity lookalike thing. I'm like, no, we're not talking about celebrity lookalike. So I always get a little bit of a chuckle when I talk about this because of that. But what's interesting to me when I've done doppelganger research is that you actually find a number of reports about doppelganger activity that aren't necessarily this whole evil twin thing. You know, there's some like a historic one, the poet Goethe. Um, he had an interesting encounter where he was en route to this one particular city. He was meeting up with he was having an affair with a woman, and so he's headed down this road, and he notices this you know interesting looking man in this gray suit with silver tie, and he's just like, oh, that's kind of a bizarre way to dress, kind of interesting. Makes note of it, keeps heading on his way. Years later, he's heading down the same road in the opposite direction. And as he's crossing this point, he looks down at himself and what he's dressed at. He's like, oh my God, I'm that guy that I noticed years ago because he was wearing the exact same clothing. So what he had actually done was it people chalk it up to a doppelganger sighting, but it was actually a time slip incident in which he had actually witnessed himself at another point in time. I have a friend of mine named Meg who grew up in a haunted house and had a kind of similar story on a bit of a different level. And she had, chalked it up to the whole, doppelganger, evil twin kind of thing. But as she told the story, the way it unfolded to me, it was another one of these time slips. And the story is basically she woke up in the middle of the night because she thought she heard her mother doing dishes in the kitchen. Her mother worked late at night. She shouldn't have been home yet. So she got up, went out toward the kitchen, actually didn't see her mother in the kitchen at that time. And all of a sudden, in through the uh, the garage door, I guess the door in the kitchen led to the garage. Her mother walks in and she notices her mother's in her like favorite sweater and jeans and all that. But her mother gives her this really strange, bizarre look at Meg, almost like she's terrified, and then runs off down the hall and into her bedroom. And Meg's like, what in the world was that? So she goes chasing after her mom, opens the bedroom door. Her mother's in bed sleeping and she's in her nightgown. And Meg's like, "What in the world's going on?" She wakes her mother up and it's like, "Mom, what are you doing in bed?" And her mother said, "Well, I've been home for hours. I got sick at work and came home and lied down. I've been asleep." So, what in the world did Meg actually witness? Because she thought she saw this doppelganger of her mother, but I don't think it's a evil twin. Obviously, this version of her mother was scared looking at Meg. I think what actually happened here again was, some sort of time slip in which she heard this activity going on, woke up, sees her mother come in, but it's her mother from a different point in time. And I believe the reason why her mother kind of freaked out and became very alarmed and scared is, you know, she probably looked at Meg and saw her daughter at a different age than what she should have been. And I think that's why she freaked out and ran off to the bedroom. So again, I think it was actually one of these time slip moments and not this whole evil twin thing.
Do you think that time slip phenomenon happens often, especially with what's considered like haunted houses? That you may just be seeing some type of trapped memory, or some type of electromagnetic memory, or something like that.
Yeah, I think time slips happen a lot more often than we believe. Yeah, there are these different interactions with ghosts and spirits, um, and some of them may truly be there's a spirit of somebody that's still there. Some of these apparitions that we see are just a residual haunt, some sort of playback. Um, but you also hear these interesting stories, like my good friend Andrea Perrin. People will know her from the movie The Conjuring. She's a real life eldest daughter from that particular house, and really to her the most fascinating story from that house is not all the hauntings and everything that happened there, and it wasn't a possession case; it was actually a seance gone bad. But to her, the most fascinating story was one particular evening when she and her mother were awake. Uh, she was making some, food for her mom. Her mom hadn't eaten earlier that day, so it was like, "Okay, fine, mom, I'll make you something up to eat." And while this is going on, her mother's in the parlor looking into the dining room, and all of a sudden, what morphs into the dining room is this old colonial family. Now, this is an old colonial farmhouse dating back to, the 1700s, and there's this woman cooking over the hearth that's there. There are a couple of children running around. There's these two gentlemen sitting at a table that wasn't their table at the time. It was a different table that had kind of morphed onto the scene with them. They had these old pewter tankards that they're drinking out of, and they turned and looked at Carolyn, Andrea's mother, and the one says to the other, "Well, would you look at that?" Again, as if Carolyn was the ghost. So again, it's kind of one of these moments in which these apparitions are appearing, but they're not really ghosts, they're not really apparitions. It's just a crossing of 2 points in time, one able to see the other, or each one able to see the other.
Yeah, that's super interesting as well. Now, when it comes to places that may experience more paranormal activity than others, we were talking about this earlier for the Laughlin interview. Places like Skinwalker Ranch, Bermuda Triangle. I know you've done a lot of research on the different triangles of the world. What do you think is actually going on with places like the Bermuda Triangle and these places of extreme energy and different phenomena that occurs there?
Yeah, these areas of the world are absolutely fascinating, and yeah, it's basically what it is our we have this dynamo in the middle of the planet, the Earth's core that has, I mean, basically, it's, molten iron, it's extremely magnetic, and that magnetic energy wells up. And what's happening is these areas of the Earth are, a lot more conductive. They're thinner in some areas. Some of them are more geologically volatile, but some just have that telluric current from the Earth's energy grid that's running through it, and they'll have some crossing points. And basically, what's going on is that magnetic energy is welling up. And is creating these different portals and supernatural activity in some of these locations around the world are you know, just more sensitive to it. So that's why the ancients would build a lot of these different what we call ancient sites of power, like the pyramids or Stonehenge. You see a lot of this strange activity happen in you said the Bermuda Triangle, or up in Alaska with the Alaska Triangle, and Sedona is a great spot. Skinwalker Ranch, of course. So there's a Dragon Triangle out by Japan. So a lot of these really interesting, bizarre places where this activity and these things happen, and we call it unexplainable. We don't know why these planes went missing or these boats went missing, or why there's so many UFO sightings there, and it's because of this energy.
Yeah, and I know that there are factions of our government that are definitely interested in this. They're openly doing the research there at Skinwalker Ranch. I'm sure that there are a lot more places that they're trying to kind of tap into this energy, and you do believe that it's also connected to the ley lines of the planet as well, right?
Yeah, well, that's what the telluric currents are. Basically, we use the term ley lines a lot, but really, what it comes down to, the ley lines are basically, the geographic points on the globe that have lined up. So, like all these different temples or stone circles or whatever, we notice that they all line up, and that's the ley. What's underneath that are they're the telluric currents. There's nobody likes saying the word telluric. It's too wordy, right?
Right.
So, but that's what they are. They're basically the Earth's energy lines that are within there. So, yeah, that's essentially what we're talking about.
Now, I want to kind of shift to, um, I guess, the global consciousness when it comes to paranormal and UFOs. That there's a lot happening right now, especially in the mainstream media. We've heard, our own government media talking about, yeah, UFOs are real. We've known they're real, and they're showing us videos and all this stuff. There's a lot of stuff being kind of pumped into society right now, but there's also, I believe, a lot of disinformation and a lot of bad information on social media. You were talking about earlier, fake videos going out on YouTube. I'd like to get your thoughts on how do you think this is affecting, especially like some of the younger generations coming up and that are interested in some of these topics that are being talked about on the news now, like ufology. The media is telling us aliens are real. What effect do you think this will have on upcoming generations, especially being mixed in with all the crap and disinfo that's on YouTube?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the Laughlin UFO Mega Conference couldn't happen at a better time. A lot of people are pointing to June 1st that there's going to be a lot of disclosure, and we'll see. We've heard these types of things before, and I'm really interested in what everybody's going to be talking about there in Laughlin this June. Um, but yeah, this seems to be a very interesting time in which what we've seen. Like the government used to deny everything, and now all of a sudden, if they're not saying, I mean, they have a few times here, where they've been like, well, yeah, that's an unidentified flying object. They're at least not denying anymore. There'll be reports, and they won't come out and say no. Sometimes they just don't say anything. It's like, well, okay, the
Right.
government's not denying it, but yeah, there are times now where they're actually saying, yeah, we don't have an answer for that. That's an unidentified flying object. They haven't admitted to having alien tech, but I
Right.
mean, we had Harry Reid the other day come out and say, yeah, I believe Lockheed Martin has stuff, and he was U.S. senator there from Nevada. So of course, that makes you your eyebrows are raised from reports like that. So um, I think what's happening is, and people have been talking about this for a while, is that over the decades, they've been kind of slowly getting us conditioned into, believing that there are other life forms out there, that, ETs, do exist, whether it's through our science fiction movies or what have you, that over time, it we've become more adept to, okay, if disclosure happens, we'd be like, okay, we kind of figured that. Where back in the 1940s, 1950s, they were just shutting everything down. You get into some of these older stories, and what I find interesting is when it comes to like Project Blue Book, or you look into some of the work that like Gray Barker, Albert K. Bender. I'm going to get into Albert K. Bender at Laughlin, because a lot of his reports of the three hat wearing entities with the glowing eyes are very similar to like the hat wearing shadow entities. um, but of course, they would shut all of that stuff down back then, and would just say, no, none of that was real. And now today, they're starting to say things like, well, yeah, this activity's been going on for, the last 10 years, last 20 years, maybe. And it's like, well, wait a minute. We knew back then it was happening. This hasn't just been the last 10 or 20 years. This has been a long, long time. At least as far as we know, the government being involved. And, we could get into, ancient alien theories and all that, that this activity has been happening for millennia.
Yeah. It definitely has been happening for a long time. What is your take on? You mentioned ancient aliens. Do you think that it may be a possibility that we could have been genetically engineered or modified by aliens? I'm at the point where I think this whole thing may be just a huge experiment for aliens, our whole existence. I mean, some of the evidence that you hear from contactees and abductees, the more profound stories that you hear from them, it's like, man, it seems like we're just some kind of experiment for extraterrestrials.
Yeah, it's really yeah, I think it's almost kind of open ball game for so many different ideas. Whether we are genetically modified by everybody talks about the stories of the Anunnaki. Whether they came here and genetically modified us to create us who we are. I mean, there's something different about us, because we just kind of showed up here on the planet a couple 100,000 years ago. They haven't found that kind of quote unquote missing link. They're still looking for it, and it doesn't seem like they're ever going to find it. Um, but you look at people have made some very, very good points, that you look at how we live, and you know, unlike every other species on this planet, we have to cook our food. I mean, I guess people eat raw sushi, but we cook our food. We need to have kind of a roof over our head and clothes and all that. We are like the only species on this planet that has to do all these different things to survive. There's no other animal out there that goes and creates their own clothing. So why is that? Well, it's because I don't believe we are, whether it's genetically modified or are we seeded from another planet and we were put here, and this is the way we've had to adapt to our environment because we're not naturally from here. And there's, of course, a lot of different ideas about, you know, did we come from Mars, or was it the planet that was between Mars or Jupiter, or were we from, are we from Sirius or the constellation Orion, or we from some other star system entirely? I think any of these ideas are a completely open game.
Yeah, I'd have to agree to you. I definitely don't feel like I'm supposed to be on this planet. Yeah. But Mike, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight. For people that are interested in finding out more about you and checking you out at the Laughlin Conference, what's your website? And you actually offer courses on your website too. Could you tell us a little bit about that before you head out as well?
Yeah, connecteduniverseportal.com. That is one of my latest projects. I have a couple of big projects that have been in the works here lately. Shadow Dimension, which is the docuseries that has come out here. So that's shadowdimension.com. The Connected Universe Portal is where I'm offering courses. Uh, uh, I should say will be offering courses. I don't know by the time somebody watches this, but the first one's going to be launched here very soon. And I'll have several. So the first one's going to be on shadow entities. We'll get into interdimensional beings in another course, in all kinds of I call it the connected universe. So all things regarding the cosmos and the consciousness being connected together across the entire universe. That's why I call it the connected universe. But there's also a membership side where you get access to all kinds of articles. There's monthly Q&A videos where you ask me anything and I'll answer it. There's sneak peek and behind the scenes videos of all the different projects that I'm working on. There's these I call them Mike's Morning Mug. They're basically like vlog videos. There's a community section there that's basically like a Facebook group or like a forum where there's interaction between all kinds of people out there. So yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. It's connecteduniverseportal.com.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thanks for joining us again tonight, and I look forward to meeting you at the Laughlin UFO Conference.
Yeah, we'll see you there, Chris.
Yeah, awesome. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening, and we'll see you again tomorrow.